Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 633. And today's date is April 3rd, 2015. And the title of this episode is The U.S. Government Recovery Looks Like an Economic Collapse. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand there are still talks going on with Greece and the ECB. We understand there's a payment coming due on April 9th, and a lot of corporate media is out there saying that Greece is not going to be able to make this payment. And we've been watching Greece very carefully, and we see they've been maneuvering towards Russia. They also have a plan B just in case they don't have the funds to cover the payment, and this might mean a default of the entire system. Their plan B basically is getting rid of the euro, going back to the drachma, and nationalizing all their banks. And we can see right now that if this does occur, this might set off a chain reaction of derivatives. Right now, there are trillions and trillions of dollars worth of derivatives. And if Greece defaults, this might start a chain reaction. This could be the start of the economic collapse. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying that we need to watch this and see how this turns out. We see the finance minister in Greece is saying, no, there's nothing to worry about here. We do have the money to pay for our April 9th deadline, and everything is going to be okay. And I think what's happening here is they're stalling. They're trying to maneuver away from the Eurozone. They're trying to exit, and they're trying to figure out a way to do this in the best case scenario. And I think the Eurozone is also doing this because they don't want to trigger the derivatives, and this could send shockwaves throughout the financial system and actually start the economic collapse. And we see right now that this is ongoing. The April 9th date is coming up. And again, Greece has been talking to Russia. Russia most likely will remove the food ban for Greece. Russia most likely will step in, help them out financially. We understand there's a gas pipeline that's going to go right through Greece. They're going to try to spur economic growth. And again, even if they leave the euro in a good way, let's say, it will spread throughout the Eurozone. Other countries will look at this. Months will go by. They'll see Greece is improving. The economy is returning. And other countries are going to say, you know something? There is no reason for us to be in the Eurozone. Why are we doing this? It is time for us to leave. And this also might start a chain reaction of a collapse scenario. And when we look around the entire private Western Central Bank system, we do see that this whole entire system is basically being held together with tape. And one small little incident completely devastates the system, and it comes crumbling down. Because we have to remember, all the private Western Central Bank countries, all they're doing is throwing more junk into the system, trying to bring more and more people into the system to keep these bubbles pumped up. Just like back in 2007, 2008, there's really no difference, except this time it is much, much worse. We really never really got out of the crash of 2008. All they did was cover it up with illusionary numbers, pumping up all the different bubbles, the derivatives, the stock market, the real estate, the auto industry. They manipulated all the statistical numbers to make us believe that everything is fine. But you have to remember, all those people lost their credit, people lost their homes, people lost their jobs, people lost their retirement, their life savings. And this time, it's going to be much, much worse. Now, here in the United States, they came out with the job report. The BLS reported that in March, 126,000 jobs were added. That's pretty bad. Nearly 50% below the 245,000 expected, and the lowest monthly increase since March of 2013. And the unemployment rate, of course, is unchanged from 5.5% because they need to keep the illusion alive here. Most importantly, this ends any speculation about a rate hike in mid-2015. The Fed is no way going to raise the interest rates. If they do, just like they did back in 2007 going into 2008, it would devastate the stock market. It would devastate the real estate market. It would have a completely gigantic impact on the entire economy. This is why they haven't done it. All those people that were going to the Fed, the short-term window, borrowing the money at 0%, investing it into the stock market, getting the return, returning it with no interest, that will end. All the automobile industry, everyone with the subprime credit, you have a heartbeat, you can get a loan because the interest rates are so low, that will end. The real estate market, as soon as we see the interest rates tick up just a little bit, mortgage applications take a complete dive. If they go up by 1 or 2%, it will be a disaster. And they know this. And this is why they're not going to raise the interest rates. And if they do, it will be a complete disaster. And everyone's looking at this job report saying, it was the weather. That is the problem. Well, guess what? It isn't the weather. The downward trend is continuing. It is not the weather whatsoever. Actually, during the worst part of the weather, jobs were much higher than they are in March. And we can see that this system is completely collapsing. I mean, think about this. There's 93.175 million people out of the labor force. What is this telling us? People cannot find work. The people who dropped out of the labor force rose by 277,000, up 2.1 million in the past year. Indicatively, this means that the labor force participation rate dropped once more from 62.8% to 62.7%, a level that was seen back in February of 1978. And remember 1978, for those who can remember that? It was awful. People couldn't find work during the 70s. And this is exactly what's going on right now. Of course, it's much easier to keep everyone in the dark of what's really going on with these illusionary numbers, but we know better. We really know what's going on here. The BLS reported that the entire labor force actually declined for the second consecutive month, down almost 100,000 in March to 156,906. And they're trying to convince us that, okay, March took a little bit of a hit. It was because of the weather, and don't worry, this is how a recovery looks really. So what they're saying is a recovery looks like a collapse. I mean, really think about it. And they're trying to tell us that, yes, we added 126,000 jobs. Where? Where are these jobs added? They're telling us that 26,000 of these jobs were added to the retail sector. Really? So, let's see. Stores are closing down. People are being laid off from the retail stores, and they added 26,000 more people in the month of March. Does this make any sense? Let's take a look at this for a second. So they're telling us that retail is doing well because they're adding more jobs. And during this year, we have about 1,784 Radio Shack stores closing, 400 Office Depot, Office Max closing, 338 Wet Seal stores closing, 300 Deb shops closing, 265 Body Central body shops closing, 250 Office I already mentioned that one. 225 Staples stores closing, 223 Barnes & Noble stores closing, 200 Children's Place closing, 180 Abercrombie & Fitch closing, 175 Aeropostale, 170 Jones Group, 150 American Eagle, 133 Target stores, and that is in Canada. Completely bankrupt, 17,000 people lost their jobs. 127 Jones New York outlets, 120 Chico's stores are closing, and there's many, many more. I can go on and on and on. So they're trying to convince us that, retail, they picked up 26,000 people. Really? With thousands upon thousands of stores closing? With tens of thousands of people being laid off. Where are they getting these jobs in retail? It makes no sense. And we know most of these jobs have been going to the food industry, those people who are waiters, bartenders. But guess what? That trend is declining also. The bartender hiring spree, the waitress, waiter hiring spree is declining right now. Right now it is declined, and it is saw its worst monthly increase since June of 2012. It's already on a downward trend. Because why? How many more people can we fit into this industry? At a certain point, there's just no more jobs. Nobody can get a job in this industry because it's full. And then we look at the youth of America and the older population. The only jobs being created are those for aged workers, Americans 55 and over. The reason is twofold. With savings rates at zero, guess what? They're getting no return on their retirement. So what do? They have to go out and get a part-time job to make ends meet. Plus, with food inflation, because most of the retirees, they just continually buy food. As prices in food go up, guess what happens? Their amount of income and disposable income goes down. So they're getting 0% interest. They have inflation. They need to get that second job. And this is what's happening right now. And also we have ZERP and NERP. And basically this all leads into it. And they can't make it. And this is why they're staying in the workforce today. So instead of young Americans entering the workforce and accumulating job skills, as well as wages and getting more, what they're doing is they're getting more and more into debt. Why? Because they're going back to school because they graduated from college and they said, there's no jobs out here. And the government and everyone else is saying, you know what? Go back to school, take out more student loans for graduate school, and then you'll get a job. Then they graduate from there and they have about $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 worth of student loans, and they still can't find work. So basically, we have the youth of America, which is the next generation. They can't find work. The older generation has to stay in jobs just to make it because they're making nothing on their retirement. And the youth of America does not have income coming in, is not going out to retail to purchase, is not saving for a home. All they're doing is putting themselves into further and further into debt. The next generation is not going to make it. All we're going to see is debt. That is it. And that's going to be a huge, huge problem. And those students who have student loans, there are about 22 states that have laws that say, listen, if you don't make your payments and you default on your loan, we take away your driver's license. I mean, some of the states are Alabama, Alaska, California. By the way, California has the most student borrowers of any state in the United States. There's also Florida, Georgia, Hawaii, Illinois, New Mexico, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Virginia, and other states. Texas is one of them. And that's the second most student, the state that has the second most student borrowers. And if they get their driver's license taken away, how can they go out and and find a job? It is very, very difficult to do so. So this whole thing is basically it's set up for everyone to fail. And those people who are still looking for work, who are now out of the workforce, and they've been laid off from either retail or the high-paying corporate jobs, who have been sending out their resumes continuously, the government is telling you that you don't even want a job. You don't want to support your family. You don't want to go on vacation. You don't want to buy food. You don't want to pay for your bills. You don't want to pay for your rent, your mortgage. You rather just stay home and not work, which is absolutely ridiculous. I don't know about you, but I know me. I would like to make a nice income, support my family, get the clothes for my kids, put food on the table, every once in a while go on a vacation. But with this economy, it is getting harder and harder to do so. And for many people, It's impossible. And basically, you haven't left the labor force. The labor force has left you, because our government officials in Congress, the president, they are no longer working for the people. And this is quite evident from what we are seeing right today here in the United States. But don't worry, they have plans. We understand they have the bail-in documents. We understand that when this system comes crumbling down, there will be no bailouts. There will be bail-ins. They'll go after the money that's in the banks. Well, we know the IMF is proposing a global wealth confiscation. We know they're going to go after savings, retirement, pension plans, because they would like to put a tax on private savings to pay down the government debt. The IMF says the sharp deterioration of the public finances in many countries have revived interest in a capital levy, a one-off tax on private wealth, as an exceptional measure to restore debt sustainability. The tax rates needed to bring down the public debt to pre-crisis levels are sizable. Reducing debt ratios to end 2007 levels would require a tax rate of about 10% on households with positive net wealth. 10%. And you know, when the IMF comes out there and tells you a percentage or makes a forecast, it's about 5 to 10 times higher than that. Look what happened in Cyprus, where they said, oh no, we're only going to need about 8 to 10%. 47% they took from the accounts. So right now, before the bail-ins, they want to tax everyone to pay off the bankers. This is what they're telling you. We will take it from your accounts. And we don't care if you agree or disagree, we're taking it to help the bankers. The IMF wants to take 10% of your private savings in addition to the taxes you're already paying. But is that only the beginning of the proposed wealth confiscation? The report's most chilling aspect is the clinical manner in which it discusses how all governments can work together to track and tax your savings. IMF economists know there are not enough rich people to fund today's governments, even if 100% of their assets of the 1% were taken. That means that all households with positive net wealth, their retirement, their savings, their home equity, would have their assets plundered by the IMF. This is what they are saying. And we know the U.S. government has created a law called FATCA, where they can go outside of the United States and find those accounts. Now, we can see this is all being set up so they can go anywhere to get this money. And of course, all of this is going to go right to the bankers. It's not going to help anyone. And the U.S., the Eurozone, Canada, Australia, all the people are going to be placed further into debt by doing this. Your wealth will be reduced. I mean, think about what they are doing here. Now, the BRICS system is coming online. We see Russia is ratifying the BRIC system. We see that they're talking about creating their own credit rating agency to rival the private Western Central Bank credit rating agencies. And of course, as we know, back to 2007, 2008, where they rated all these subprime securities, AAA, we know right now that these credit rating agencies are controlled by the central bankers, and they'll do whatever they want, and they won't even question it. And we can see right now, China, Russia, they're looking at this and saying, listen, they're not even rating everything correctly. They're doing it in the interest of the private Western Central Bank system. We need to create a system that will counter what they are doing, and we need it for our own BRIC system. And this is what they're doing right now. And we can see that more members are joining the BRIC system. There are talks, and there might be somehow, some way that France, Germany, Italy, Australia might move over and look at the BRIC system. Because as we know, these nations have already joined the China-led infrastructure bank. We know France was saying we got to get rid of these sanctions. They were moving closer with Russia in agreement with them, and then all of a sudden they had a terrorist attack to bring them back into the private Western central bank theme. And we can see right now a lot of these countries are saying that, we are hurting right now. We can't continue like this because we are losing billions upon billions of dollars. And they see that the United States government, the central bankers, they are pushing war. We already see with this framework deal with Iran, other countries are saying, once the sanctions come down, we're going to make economic deals with Iran. Russia right now is looking to maybe move some of their automakers into Iran, where basically vehicles will be assembled in Iran. And again, we can see the only reason Iran is not getting business right now from Russia or China, actually they are bartering and things like that, but full-on business is because of the sanctions. And once the UN removes the sanctions, it's open season. They're ready to go. And we can see that Russia, China, and other nations are getting ready and prepared. And if the U.S. decides to keep just U.S. sanctions on Iran, guess what? It won't stop the other countries. They'll continually do this. The only reason the other countries didn't move in and invest in Iran is because of the UN sanctions. If the UN sanctions are dropped and let's just say the U.S. sanctions, they decide to place some on Iran, the United States will be left out of all the business in that area. And I don't think they're going to go ahead and do that, even though Congress, with Israel controlling them, pushing them to place more sanctions, it won't make sense in the end. And this is why we have to be a little bit nervous, because when these people are pushed up against the wall, they come out with their claws, and that means they do things like false flag events, pretending that, they did something and this is why we attacked. And a little bit nervous about Israel right now, because they can just fly in there and start attacking. I hear people in the United States, in the government, saying we should just go ahead and bomb Iran. And this is crazy talk because Iran has absolutely done nothing at all. And they're in the middle of a peace negotiation, not just with the United States, with other nations. Now, out in Ukraine, we see Gazprom has paid a $30 million gas advance payment. This will bring them into the middle of April. And it's piecemeal right now. And what's very interesting is that Ukrainian Prime Minister Yatsenyuk is in Germany right now. And he is out there saying Putin's goal is to lead a war against the West. So Ukraine is asking the West to help protect Europe and the European Union against Russia. Basically, one of the goals of Yatsenyuk, he is preparing Germany for the resumption of the conflict in eastern Ukraine. Yatsenyuk is preparing Germans morally. He is explaining to them how events will develop according to the plan prepared by the Americans. And when the war is going to resume, he is telling the Germans, prepare your political position, your explanations as to why the Minsk agreements were disrupted, and whom we're going to blame for it. Basically what they're doing is they're getting ready for a major offensive. And they're covering all the bases to make sure that everyone has the story straight. And who to blame when this occurs. There are Ukrainian lawmakers in Ukraine right now, and they're calling for Yatsenyuk's resignation. We see the Nikolai Gordienko, the former official who accused Yatsenyuk of corruption, is asking for his removal. Gordienko accused Yatsenyuk of covering up corruption schemes, according to him. And, is anyone really surprised that there's corruption going on inside the government of Ukraine at this point? This is what they used to get rid of Yanukovych. They're saying, he was corrupt, he was pocketing money. They're doing the same thing. There is really no difference Of course, they didn't have proof of that. They were just saying it. But here, a lot of the IMF money that was coming in, it just completely disappeared. And now some of the Ukrainian lawmakers are investigating Yatsenyuk, trying to figure out what is going on here. Now, very interestingly, in Fox News, they had a report saying Russian military forces shift from fighting alongside Ukraine rebels to training them now. And then they showed a picture of a tank with a Russian flag on it. Now, I took a screenshot of this. It's on the X22Report.com, and those people on YouTube, you can see it on YouTube. And what's very interesting, and so far that I checked today, they haven't changed it. They took a picture, and the date is July 29th, 2015. So they know the future. No, basically what they did is they took a picture and they changed it from 2014 to 2015. But they forgot to change the month. And I went onto Google Images and I did a search of this image. Do you know this image showed up on February 2014, July 2014, August 2014, September 2014, and it was used for all different stories like Russia's invading, Russia's in Ukraine, and they continually use the same picture over and over and over again. So this is how you can tell this is all complete propaganda. Now, Poroshenko is out there, and he has just submitted a draft law on legal procedures for introducing martial law. That sounds like peace and a ceasefire. Seems like he's going along with the Minsk II agreements, right? The document stipulates rules for introducing and lifting martial law in the country. The draft law stipulates that the vital facilities of the national economy are to be taken under intensified protection. All able-bodied individuals not engaged in the defense sector are to be bound by a labor duty. Property of individuals and communities is to be alienated by force. A curfew is to be introduced. Free movements of people are to be restricted, and peaceful rallies, gatherings, and demonstrations are to be forbidden. This is martial law, and you have to remember who is pushing him to do this. The United States government, central bankers, because they are in control. What are we seeing here in the United States? With Jade Helm, almost the same thing that they're going to try to do. The only difference right now is we still have the Constitution. We have the rights of the people. In Ukraine, they have none of this. It's much easier for them just to do it. Now, we see NATO has deployed about 12 A-10 Warthog planes to Romania as part of their theater security effort to counter Russian aggression in Ukraine. The 354th Expeditionary Fighter Squadron forward deployed 12 A-10 Thunderbolt II aircraft and approximately about 200 airmen. The deployment marks the first ever deployment of A-10s in Romania. So again, they're moving all military assets all into Eastern Europe. They are getting prepared. We see the U.S. destroyer Jason Dunham has entered the water area of the Black Sea. The ship's forthcoming entry of the sea was announced by the U.S. 6th Fleet on Thursday. And of course, as we remember, the Montreal Convention of 1936, non-state warships can only stay in the Black Sea for no more than 21 days, and they have to leave. We see the Iranian deal, the framework has been set. The finalized deal is not going to happen just yet. They have until July 1st. But lifting of the sanctions of Iranian oil exports that are estimated at between 1.5 million barrels a day. The Iranian cheap oil is likely to flood the already saturated market, resulting maybe in oil prices going down. But we'll have to see how that happens here. It should also be noted that the Iran's natural gas are very large. Tehran has the world's second largest gas reserves behind Russia. The Iran nuclear deal would improve Tehran's economic situation, allowing Iranian authorities to increase their influence over weak Middle Eastern governments. And we can see right now, all this natural gas, all this oil, how are they selling it? Are they using the US dollar? And this is what was left out of the framework that was broadcast to everyone in the world. And that is the real nuts and bolts of what's going on here. The takeover of the central bank and the control of the natural resources to sell it using the US dollar. Everything else, they're trying to keep you confused of what's really going on. Yes, there are things in there about nuclear or medical isotopes which competes with other countries, but the main crux of it is the things they're not saying. And this is it, because look what Iran has. And they want it to keep the system propped up. Russia is already to sell the S-300 missiles to Iran if all the sanctions are removed. And they are getting ready. They're going to give whatever they possibly can to Iran. They're going to make as many deals as possibly can. China's going to do the same. And we see this is ongoing, where Russia and China have a very close relationship with Iran, and it's going to get closer as time goes on. We see India out in the Middle East. We understand that Yemen is still under attack by Saudi Arabia. This is an aggressive attack. Yemen has not attacked Saudi Arabia whatsoever, and they're invading Yemen. Of course, the president is hiding outside the country, and he's using foreign forces to take his country back, which kind of counters everything the United States continually says. Because in Ukraine, when the people wanted to take over the government, they were behind it. When the Yemeni people want to take over the government, they're not behind it, because they already had a puppet government in there, in Yemen, and they don't want that removed. And we see India right now is evacuating its citizens by air. Over 300 Indian nationals reached Djibouti on board a military ship earlier in the day. China sent its 20th fleet of 3 warships to the Gulf of Aden off of Somalia to protect and escort civilian ships. The fleet consists of a missile destroyer, a missile frigate, supply ship, and the ships left the East China port city on Friday. The fleet is equipped with 2 helicopters and has dozens of special operations soldiers and more than 800 officers and soldiers on board. We see already that the Saudis are parachuting weapons in to the forces that are still loyal to the president to help them. And we can see right now this whole thing is a complete mess in the Middle East. The United States is getting involved right now, even though they don't have the authorization for war. They fired a missile into Saudi Arabia. Now they have the green light to refuel the Saudi jets, and they're giving intel to Saudi Arabia to track down and find the Houthis. But we can see Saudi Arabia basically is just hitting the infrastructure, hitting civilian areas. They're just hitting anything that moves at this point in time. And right now, they are taking all their orders from the United States government central bankers. Now, we understand that the FBI continuously sets up patsies. And yesterday I mentioned that there were women in New York City that were set up. And what's very interesting about this whole story, these women were in New York City, the borough of Queens, where they contacted an FBI informant and ended up being arrested as terrorists. 28-year-old Noelle Valensaz and 31-year-old Asia Sidikou, a pair of roommates, had reportedly discussed bombs and met with the FBI informant. And basically, what do they have on them? Well, one of the women wrote a poem which was published in the Yemeni Al-Qaeda's magazine in 2009, and the other roommate had a picture of Osama bin Laden on her phone as the background image. The FBI officials concede that there was no specific plot with any specific target, and that no explosive devices were recovered. There was absolutely nothing. And they're calling them that, they were in contact with ISIS. No, they were in contact with the FBI. Actually, they had no plans to do anything. This is all made up. It's propaganda. And of course, our government officials, like Dianne Feinstein, as soon as they hear this, they start spewing out things like, this is why we need to censor the internet. So basically get rid of the First Amendment. That's what she's saying. So basically this was an FBI trap. The 2 women did absolutely nothing. So what they wrote a poem? So what they have a picture? They did absolutely, there was no explosives. There was no plot. They didn't catch them in doing anything. They never even spoke to anybody. It's propaganda to make you believe. Basically, it wasn't even the internet where they got their information. You know where they got their information? From the FBI. They're the ones who gave them the anarchist cookbook. They didn't go to the internet and find it. But of course our government people, they like to come out and say, this is the reason why we need to censor the internet. No. Basically, what you want to do is control the internet and tell us what we can and cannot look at. Free speech allows anyone to put anything they want on the internet. The people have the choice of looking or not looking. When you censor something, this is controlled speech. When you tell people you have to get a permit, that is controlled speech. That's permission speech. It is not free speech. All speech is free. It could be hate. It could be something that someone doesn't like. But that's the beauty of it. Nobody controls it. You know who controls it? The people. The people say, you know something? We all decided we are no longer going to listen to you. We're going to change the channel. We're not going to listen to your radio broadcast. But once the government steps in, it turns into government-controlled speech. They decide for you. And this is the problem. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.